Hello, and welcome to the Cape Coffee Beans podcast. My name is Faden, and I'm the founder of Cape Coffee Beans, South Africa's leading retailer in the specialty coffee space. We sell everything you need to make an amazing cup of coffee at home, at the office, in the cafe, or even on the road, including equipment, accessories, and artisan roasted coffee beans, both online and in store at our headquarters in Claremont, Cape Town. This podcast is a deep dive into the world of South African specialty coffee with a focus on the brands, the businesses, and the people in the local coffee scene, many of whom I'm privileged to work with. I'll be bringing you interviews with many of these South African coffee heroes, so please do subscribe to the podcast and share it with your coffee-loving friends. Thank you for your support. Now let's get to today's episode. Hello, coffee lovers. I am very excited to introduce this episode of the Cape Coffee Beans podcast because there are very many important firsts in this particular podcast episode. Probably the biggest one is that this episode is going to feature our very first interview with a coffee farmer. Most of the previous episodes have featured baristas and roastery owners and roasters, but this is the first time we're getting to chat to a farmer. But it's not just any coffee farmer that we're talking to, because we are talking to Des Wichmann of Mpenjati, which is an estate based in KZN. So not only are we talking to a coffee farmer, but we are talking to somebody who's growing coffee in South Africa. In case you didn't realize, there are not that many coffee farmers in South Africa, though perhaps more than we think, as comes out in this particular interview. But it is a rare privilege and a treat to talk to somebody who's actually growing the beverage, or at least the crop that leads to the beverage that we love so much, and specifically to chat to someone who's doing it in South Africa. This episode actually turned out to be something quite different from what I was expecting, because I thought that we were going to get into a lot of detail about the process of farming coffee, which we do, and please forgive us if in the episode there are some technical and esoteric terms that you don't recognize. I quite intentionally stayed away from elaborating on all of them, because I thought that might be too much to cover in one episode, though maybe it's something we can revisit. But what this episode did turn out to be, in my mind, was an incredible story of entrepreneurship. Des is quite a soft-spoken and impressively modest man, but as I listened to him tell his story, I thought to myself, what an amazing entrepreneur. This man in just a few years has gone from never having farmed coffee before to doing the whole process, from planting to growing to picking to processing, experimenting all along the way, and with only a few or almost no peers around him to learn from. He has jumped on the web, even gone on Instagram and looked up Brazilian and Colombian counterparts to learn from, and I was amazed by how he has hustled and taught himself to do something which actually is quite difficult, probably more difficult than he makes it out to be. So I was very impressed with Des. I really enjoyed talking to him. I hope you enjoy listening to this episode. So without further ado, here is Des Wichmann of Mpenjati Coffee. Hello, Des. Welcome to the Cape Coffee Beans podcast.
Yeah, good to meet you.
It's good to chat to you properly, finally. I've heard a lot about your coffee exploits, and I'm excited for this conversation today because you are the first coffee farmer that we're going to be talking to on the podcast, which is quite exciting for us. It's a rare privilege for our listeners, I think, to hear from somebody who's actually growing coffee rather than just roasting coffee. And so I think we'd love to start with hearing a little bit about your story, but perhaps we can go back to the times before coffee to start with. And may I ask you just to give the listeners a little bit of context on your personal background before you got into this coffee thing?
Yeah, sure. So I've actually was growing up down here on the KZN South Coast near Port Edward. I grew up on a family farm there, and my dad and mom did sugarcane and bananas back in the day. And yeah, so I had the privilege of always being on the farm and growing up and learning basically how to farm through my parents, and then obviously schooled at an agricultural college up in Mooi River called Western. And yeah, I've just been in the farming, vicinity or area all the time. And that's really what I've done, And then finished obviously school and college, and I said to Dad, hey, we need to plant some coffee. And so that was an idea birthed right when I just finished school. Beaver Creek had just kind of started then too. That was, there was a little seed there in the beginning. And then obviously after leaving, I, worked and traveled for other people and traveled to America and went around America for a year traveling and that. And then came home and, got married and started a life with everything. And I was fortunate enough to work for some other farmers to gain experience, what it's like working for other people. And then from there, my dad said, well, come home and come and help on the farm at home. And he had leased a farm just up the road from us where I grew up. And we were fortunate enough to take over the lease from dad. And we ended up planting some coffee there. It was quite high up and colder. And then I ended up selling that farm and then having to move again. So I've then had to start again on a new farm that we found. And adjacently, obviously, planting it all up to coffee and really just focusing, on coffee. I'd previously on the old farm, I tried oyster mushrooms, zucchinis, which is baby marrows, paddy pans. I've tried oyster mushrooms, you name it. I pretty much try to grow and do and fiddle with all these niche little crops, can I say, and the coffee became a sort of a side hustle, could you call it? And now it's become a little bit more than a side hustle, should I say?
And was there something that got you into coffee on a personal level before you started growing it? Is it something that you were particularly interested in, or did you come at it from the farming side from the start?
So growing up on a sugarcane farm down here by us, you got to look at economies of scale, So as a youngster in the late 70s, we had the sugarcane boom. You could do a small amount of sugarcane and you would be able to survive on it, And because of economies of scale or living or whatever has got expensive over the years. So that small sugarcane farm is not worth it anymore. And in our area, everybody's kind of going out of sugarcane. I had to look at what's the next best thing. A lot of my friends, macadamia farm in the area is very big and a lot of it. So therefore we ended up looking at it and saying, well, I'd rather be big enough in the next crop than everybody else, because I felt I was too late to get into the macadamia industry to try and get an income or make a living out of it. So down by us, it looked like it was the right thing to do. Let's try and get into coffee. We have agritourism and it's something different. I intend to enjoy being able to sell my own product, market my own product, as opposed to, being a price taker like the sugar industry, So it was kind of, let's have a look at what the next best thing is. And coffee was one of them that we could do down here. So that was, a line that I took and I just jumped in the deep end, I guess.
That's interesting because I have to admit, I'm very ignorant about the growing side of coffee. I only kind of, know what we hear about when we drink the coffees. And so I must admit that I wouldn't think that coffee is one of the things that you would think of in KZN, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I mean, what kind of sparked the idea? What made you look in that direction?
I don't know. Like I said earlier on, Beaver Creek had been doing it here since 1984, right, and they had a bit of success with it. So the idea was, let's try. I think if you look, macadamias, like I said, I thought I was just too late. The bigger guys are making, can I say, some good money, not now, the prices come down, but, 4 years ago, they were doing very well. And I felt that I was just too late to get onto that bus, because by the time I got ready, the prices might have dropped. Let's do coffee and be big enough so when people want to come along with coffee, I'm established, So it was something that we could do in our area. I couldn't go and grow maize or do something else. So we had to kind of look what would work here. In the late 80s, they also grew coffee here in the Mzumbi area in KZN and a little bit north of us. There was some coffee, grown in Hebridean and things like that. So if you look at it that way, they did it. I think there was a story, an article written that was that, the sugar boom came off and the coffee guys in South Africa could grow good coffee, but they were a bit arrogant in a sense. And I think that's when the coffee board was getting together and they said, no, they'd try and do it on their own. And then labor got expensive in South Africa, so it didn't work out. But I think those times in the late 70s and 80s, it's different to today. The coffee culture for me has changed, where you're seeing a lot of roasters, a lot of guys going into speciality. So there's a door opening, I think, in the coffee world, can I call it, or coffee culture, where things are changing, I think, compared to what it was like in the 80s. We all just drank Fresco, Today, everybody's enjoying a nice specialty coffee, I guess, at the end of the day, that's really interested in coffee.
Again, this is probably an ignorant question from the perspective of my lack of understanding of farming, but I mean, so how different is it growing coffee versus some of the other crops that you have been involved in growing? Did it require a lot of new skills, or is it really just just another crop that applies a lot of the same methodologies that you already knew?
Yeah, so some of the methodologies, like your fertilizer and techniques of farming, are pretty similar to macadamias. They're both trees, and this, can I call them both trees? So in a sense, it is the same, but there's differences. Sugarcane, bananas, whatever it is. It's kind of in the same, but a little bit different in a sense. For me personally, on a coffee side, we've had to learn. There's sugarcane. They've got a lot of extension services in South Africa, and bananas, there's study groups, and macadamias, the guys have got all their study groups. In South Africa, there's not many of us that have farmed coffee or doing it successfully yet, so we're learning, and that's where, you got your basics, but when it comes down to certain aspects, it is different.
Right. And from when you started planting coffee to today, how has the business evolved?
Yeah, it has. It's evolved quite a bit. I've had to learn. I've had to learn a lot. From coffee, because it's just not something that you can put a teaspoon in and off you go. So from the coffee side of things, you've got to learn how to grow it. Pests and diseases. The first 1 year, 2 year, oh no, things are going fine, and then all of a sudden you get pests and diseases coming in that you didn't know about. Nobody's, like I said earlier on, can help you. You either get infested, or you see something and you've had to self-teach myself to realize, okay, there's a problem here. Let's try and address it. We have got some, companies that can help us on that side, but they're also in the dark because, they don't know about it either. So we both got to try and do our own research to come up, okay, well, this is it. So for example, like in 2020, I started farming coffee in 2017. We germinated our first seed, and then we planted 10 hectares. And then, our first year was fine. We got 300 kgs of green bean, and we were super excited. And then 2020, I did 1.7 tons of green. And then obviously going through that year, we actually lost a lot. We must have probably thrown away at least 2 to 3 tons of cherry, because I had thought that I had overspray with a weedicide, which is to spray the weeds, and it was a leaf miner, and now you only learn about that. So I had this huge infestation, which actually crippled us. And then 2021, we had to, our crop went down to we're down to 500 kgs of green last year. So you definitely have to learn to adapt quickly and to change things. So yeah, it's been a struggle from the learning side of coffee. You've had to now learn about funguses, learn about pesticides, that these pests that we do have, just to control them. So we've taken a stance on a thing called IPM, which is integrated pest management, and we leave the grass long. That the good bugs eat the bad bugs, and just try and keep it level-headed. We're not trying to create a world of all these dangerous, harmful chemicals around, So I've had to learn a little bit of that on the farming, and you get certain things like dieback where, where the trees are produced so well that they end up dying back because their root structure can't actually, keep the coffee, that the cherries that are there, So we've learned a little bit about that. So yeah, it's every year is a new year, I guess. So I've had to learn on that. And then I've had a good friend called mentor that's helped me a lot, Theo Leroux. He's very passionate about coffee and the fermenting side. So you get from picking it and making sure we got the right bricks, So I have a bricks meter where we measure the sugars, the bricks is in the certain varietals, like your Trois, it's got 15 to 20% bricks. Your F6 has got 20 to 25. I don't know if you've heard about the Rasmosa or Racemosa, that rare indigenous to southern Mozambique, northern KZN, north coast. It's amazing how their sugars are. And so we've had to learn about that. You just think, I'm just going to pick a red cherry. There's a lot more to picking that red cherry, whether it's red or maroon, and having to teach our labor and pickers to do that. So you've got that side, a little bit of thing to do. And then straight into the pulping, into the wet mill, where we've had to learn about washed processing, yellow honey, which I've been trying. Red honey, which I've been trying. Is my way the right way or not? I don't know. Natural. We did some naturals as well. I've done this. I don't know. Is it aerobic, anaerobic? I don't know. But we're trying these weird and wonderful ideas to enhance some good flavors. Keep it natural, and hopefully we can get some good coffee, because I think that's what counts. We don't want to lose the stigma that South Africa is bad coffee, because then I think we're going down the wrong street. So I'm trying these ways, but I'm just trying to do it right. So I've had to learn with that. And then obviously the drying beds and things like that, which is kind of okay. And then we got to move into, so you're learning that little aspect of the wet processing, and then you've got to learn to be hulling it. And I bought a gravitational table for the last 2 years. I didn't only had a grading table, so I had the huller and my grading table, which we made and built ourselves because we couldn't get one. So originally in 2020, I had this little box and these shelves like you see on the SCA thing. So if you can picture the SCA, but probably 5 times the size. And I had a guy shaking, and he took so long, and I was like, no, we got to do something better. And to buy one from India or from McKinnon or wherever was so expensive. I was like, no, I'm sure I can build it for cheaper. So which I did. I made my own grading table with hopefully the right specs, and yeah, it seems to work, which is now a little bit more mechanical to help. So, and then now this last year in November, we bought a gravitational table just to help us with the quality, you control, and sorting out obviously the good and the bad. So yeah, then you got obviously from the grading and getting it right, and making sure the moistures are right too. We've had to get a lot of equipment. You don't realize all the stuff to get and to invest in to make sure it gets right. So yeah, it's been a long journey, should I say?
Yes, and it sounds like it has a lot of complexity. Have your harvests rebounded this year after you said it dropped from 1.7 to half a ton?
Yeah, so at the moment we're sitting on about, I haven't done yesterday's calculation because we had no power. So yesterday's calculation, I should be just short on about 17 tons of cherry already. So we're almost probably sitting at about 2.5, 2.6 tons of green. Half of it is sitting on the drying beds and half, and some of it. So yeah, a lot of it is on the drying bed. So yeah, we've definitely done the upscale by rectifying, what's come wrong. So yeah, there has been a vast improvement. Yeah.
That's great to hear. It sounds like there's a lot to manage there. I'm just curious to hear a little bit about what does your organization look like? What kind of team do you have around you working on this project?
Yeah, so originally when we first started, we only had 4 people. So we would get casuals in. Actually, the first 4 guys, I started the nursery, and you got casuals in just to start. We grow our own trees at the nursery. We germinate and do our own trees, to plant out. So we started off small with 4 guys, and we ran 10 hectares, and then we would get seasonal. Well, we actually had the 4 guys, so I've just kept them on. We did the first year picking, and we're up to like 13 staff. We have 55 hectares in. So generally, the maintenance side of running it is fairly okay, because, you're just really making sure we're fertilizing, keeping the lines clean, mowing, things like that, generally spraying when we have to spray for leaf miner and rust. Obviously, you guys know about rust. But yeah, that's, so it's not too bad. Obviously, every kind of time, it has its work. And then we obviously get pickers in, casuals, what we call a casual staff that come in and pick the stuff. So on the farm side, yeah, we started with 4 and we're up to about 13 now. And then in June, no, I beg your pardon, in June now, in April, we had like 36 pickers. We had a lot of coffee come through. So so we had a lot of pickers, but now we're down to about 10 pickers a day at the moment, So yeah, I've got that on that side. And then on the other side, on the processing side, I've got 2, a guy and a girl, a guy and a lady. The 2 of them, they do the pulping, and then all the drying and making sure. So we got 2 there, one for pulping and depending on what we're doing, washed, yellow, red honeys, naturals. And then they obviously turn the beds every day. They just got it every hour. We turning coffee, to dry. And then on the dry side, on the hulling and that, so normally we've got a little cafe and a little roastery. So the staff that normally, if we're quiet during the week, Monday, Tuesdays, I got one guy that'll hull, and then one of the baristas actually hull and grade and kind of do the dry side of things, and then we all just pitch in ourselves. My manager who runs the cafe, he also hulls a little bit and things like that. So whoever can pitch in has got a gap. Yeah, on Monday I was there. We were basically sorting all the coffees out and grading it, and that's everybody's got to pitch in when there's a gap.
Yeah, so it's a properly vertically integrated coffee business, right? From all the way from the hulling to the pulling the espresso shots. That's impressive. And so it sounds like you have lots of people that you bring on either on a casual basis or a full-time basis. And my understanding is that the technique at all stages of this process is quite important. Like even how you pick coffee and picking the right cherries, it's not something that's completely obvious. People need to know how to do it properly. Are you finding people that have experience with coffee, or are you needing to train them up on all of this from scratch?
Yeah, so some of them actually come back. I got like 4 or 5 ladies that have been with me since the beginning. So they've got an idea. This year, what we did is I bought we made a red bangle, in other words, So I made this, can I call it a bangle or a bracelet, a red bracelet, made out of cotton. And it was too red. In other words, I actually had to get one a little bit darker. So what you found is that we're picking it just too early and leaving it a bit longer. So that was another thing we had to learn, is leaving coffees at the right time, because if you overleave it, then it gets overripe, and then so it's a catch-22 as to where to get it at the right time. But what I found with the red bracelets, as they worked, it got dirtier and dirtier. So therefore, it was getting more maroon, which actually worked out, I guess, fine in the end. But yeah, so we do have about 4 or 5 that come back seasonally that do, and then obviously the rest you got to just train, So they come in and out quite quickly, So and then you got to look at economies of scale, because if you have too many, it costs you a lot of money. I mean, people don't realize what we pay. It's like normally we lose 85% of our volume. So you pick 6 tons of coffee, you're only getting 1 ton of green out. That's on a 6-to-1 ratio, which is very good. So sometimes it could go up to 7 tons of cherry to get you 1 ton. So depending on your ratio, one's got to be careful. Otherwise, that green bean price actually, gets quite expensive. I didn't mention actually earlier, you talk about learning curves, and in 2020, we bought a pulper to come, and then we ended up having to literally pulp. We ordered it, and then they were like, no, we'll manufacture it. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Our coffee's coming ready. They said 6 to 8 weeks. So we're like, okay, cool. So we thought we'd make it, and we started with a natural. We thought, we'll start picking, we'll do naturals. Little did I know that naturals take a little bit longer than washed coffee. And then COVID obviously hit in 2020, and we had to literally pulp 10 tons by hand. And it was a real nightmare. But anyway, we had a lot of those staff also that have come back to work with us. So it's been a journey.
Yes, it sounds like it. I'm curious. I mean, so you've mentioned some of the challenges that you faced in terms of, infestations and education and all those things. I'm curious, is there anything else that you think is a particular challenge to you as a coffee farmer in South Africa that maybe your peers in other coffee growing regions wouldn't experience? Are there unique South African challenges?
I think my biggest challenges is pest and diseases. I think I follow a few guys, Brazil farms and Colombian farms, obviously on Instagram and that, and you can kind of learn by eyesight. I can't speak Spanish, so it's a real problem. I normally have to hit C translation, but there's nothing worse when they're talking about it or something. So I can't speak Spanish, but you get an idea on the videos as to what they're doing, and just from a farming kind of perspective. So yeah, I don't. It's more for me as I wish I'd known more about leaf miner and more about coffee berry borer, for example. Those funguses is another one. This year, it's all about funguses, and compaction of soil. So, those are just the small little intricacy things. And then obviously finance is another big thing. We like, for example, when we started, our fertilizer price this year has doubled in price. So with the costs like that, and everybody knows our fuel prices have gone up. So you've got to, start being wise, So especially our fertilizers now, we're having to worry about that. being doubled. It's across the world. You read about it. Brazil have got the same problem as Colombia. In Colombia, we've all got the same fertilizing problem. How are we going to afford to fertilize where the green price is? If you look at it on a commercial scale. So if you look at it on those aspects, and we say, hey guys, it is a problem. But I'm in the same boat as the next door neighbor who's doing macadamias, or the next door neighbor who's doing bananas or sugarcane. So that we're all in the same boat, really. So for me, my challenges really on the farming side would be like pest and diseases and things like that. I've had to learn how to germinate my own coffee and things like that. So we learn. There's a lot out there to learn from.
And what about this question of altitude, right? I mean, the conventional wisdom says that you got to grow great coffee at high altitude, and you're obviously growing it quite close to sea level. Does that present any particular challenges? And I'd love to hear your comments generally on the altitude question.
There's the sea over there.
Yeah, for those listening on audio, it's very visible behind Des there.
Yeah, so Dylan Cummings wrote a very good article from Beaver Creek on the growing coffees, and if I recall correctly, you got the coffee belt, along the equator or whatever, and then on his side you end up we fall on the latitude side, if I'm correct, and we fall kind of in that. People forget about the latitude side of it, but we get a lot of rainfall here. Our temperatures are good. We're not getting any frost. So my theory is if we can grow good coffee or good products, whether it's bananas, macadamias, coffee, what's the difference? If we do it right, from farming it to the process, the fermentation, to creating it, why can't we? And the coffee that I've produced at the moment, there's a few roasters that have cupped it and scored it. We've sent it to, a few other bigger guys, companies, and they've really scored it and given us reports back, and we've got some good points from that, and we've done very well. So I can't, I always say, if you can do it right, let's keep going. So if I was doing something, if we were getting bad points and not getting speciality, well, then maybe we wouldn't be farming coffee, I guess. But because I've been able to just get over and get to speciality status, can I say that? It's maybe worth our while.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I hope that answers your question. It is. It's a conscientious. I think there could be a lot of arguments over a cup of coffee about coffee grown in altitude. It would be nice to take a blind test and say, guys, take this, taste this, and then see what the guys do. Let the Q graders see, having not known where it comes from.
Yes. Well, it's funny. I've actually watched this Vice documentary that's available on YouTube, which I'll link to in the show notes as well. And I'll also mention link to the piece that you mentioned that Dylan Cummings wrote. But there's a Vice documentary about guys growing coffee near Los Angeles, very near sea level, and who do subject their coffees to blind tests by Q graders and achieved remarkable results. So it seems that around the world there are people challenging this assumption that we've made that coffee has to be grown at altitude. It seems maybe it's not the altitude, maybe it's something to do with what you find at altitude, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you look at the guys that are, you call density, and we want longer development, in the coffee. I find, like, especially for me now, my time in winter, we going in. So the beans are now, especially this time of year, June, July. Actually, let's talk a little bit. So we start getting cold here end of March, April. So our development or ripening of that coffee, it takes a little bit slower and longer. So at the end of the day, I think if we got the right sugars or brixes in that cherry, we can get, good coffee, I guess, out of it. It's a really conscientious, question.
Yeah. And I suppose one that we could dedicate a whole podcast episode to. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the broader South African coffee growing industry. Obviously, there aren't a lot of South African coffee growers, as you've mentioned. Do you think that there is a bright future for coffee cultivation in South Africa?
So I've had a lot of guys coming to see. Well, we've had a few farmers, asking questions and things like that. I've jumped in the deep end. There's nobody around. I've just taken the risk. I think my family hates me because I just about tried so many things and jumped in the deep end. So, and especially with coffee, I have, because there's nobody around us that can tell us, well, this has cost this much, you know. There's nobody that can tell us, you know, tons per hectare. You know, those are the little things actually that I've got to learn now. People ask, well, how many tons per hectare you get? And, well, I don't know because my trees are still growing, you know. So on that aspect, so there has been a bit of interest, you know, from especially on the sugar guys, where their prices haven't been good. They're looking to diversify. So from sugar, you know, put a bit of coffee in. There's other guys that have asked about it, you know. I've kind of created, can I say, a brand. So I'm growing obviously my own coffee. I'm roasting my own coffee, and I got a little cafe, you know. So that kind of helps. And then obviously we're wanting other roasters to try our coffee, because I feel there is a bit of a growth in locally grown stuff, whether it's vegetables or whatever it is. You know, we kind of going down the, you know, where the guys are led, well, where's our South African coffee? Where's our South African grown veggies or things like that? So I think there could be a little bit of scope for that at the moment. And the way the coffee culture is going, you know, I think there's a lot of guys out there that are wanting some good coffees.
And do you think that there is enough territory in South Africa to grow more significant quantities of coffee? Like, could South Africa become a bigger producer of coffee that would actually, you know, register versus some of the other larger producers?
I think so. I got told the other day, actually, there was a big farm in Zanin, if I was not mistaken, or Limpopo somewhere, that the guy had 200 hectares of coffee. I didn't even know that. And he's obviously sold the farm, and the guys that bought that farm pulled it all out. It was you know, and I was like dumbstruck. I would love to meet these guys, because you just hear them through the, you know, the grapevine that he had, I think, 200 hectares, which is incredible, you know. There was a guy, funny enough, I've known him for many years now, and he built a wet mill for up the road, a few k's up the road, for a guy who did coffee in the late 70s. He said, no, we're going to grow coffee. And I didn't even know that, you know, and I could have picked his brain on how to build and make a wet mill, you know. So I do think there is a bit of scope, but the problem is his price, you know, at the end of the day. So I think we've got to become more, can I say, an organization together, more an association, a group of guys that we can get, you know. I got one farmer who's supplying me. He bought a macadamia, and the guy had a bit of coffee on it. Him and I, basically, I know the owner, so him and I planted together at the same time, you know, 4 years ago, and that coffee is coming to me, and they new owners of the farm. So, you know, for me, I'm having to learn that side of thing, where I've said to the guys, look, we'll pulp it, we'll do everything, and then, you know, we get somebody to grade it, and then he gets paid for that price. So there's a bit of structure that we can actually do, you know, and create something. So at the moment, it's very small. You know, I got to go and look and learn and say to the guys, yeah, guys, you can get 100 Rand a kilo, or you can get 150 Rand a kilo if it's scoring high. So we've just got to try and get ourselves, can I say, more organized in that sense, you know, for them to do that.
Interesting. I mean, I wonder if we'll see the day where South African specialty coffees will be being served in specialty cafes around the world. I mean, obviously, at the moment, they're not really figuring it. Do you think that might happen one day in the future?
And that was my dream in the beginning. You know, when I first started in the macadamia guys, all my friends, they were, you know, they were macadamia farmers, and they are, like I always say, they used to get dollars, paid in dollars. So their price was dollar based. And I was like, hey, if I want coffee, I want to plant it, get dollar based, you know. So it was always in the back of the mind. But the South African market is taking up our coffee, so we don't have enough, you know, to get over there. You know, I had Michael, I don't know if you know him, from I&M Smith. They big green bean guys, you know, that buy in containers. It was really nice having him down. He came down to see us, you know. And if you want to go that route, you've got to have the volume, you know. So I don't have the volume. Ideally, that's what I said. I want you to do that. And I actually went on a course at Seven Oaks, a green bean, the little green bean coffee training course. I went there to learn, because I got chucked in the deep end. I was like, oh, I got to learn a little bit about this. And I've heard about that, and I went to that 2 years ago, whenever it was. And I remember looking out the window, and they were offloading a container, and I think the container was 19 tons. And I was like, sure, that's a lot of coffee that I have to produce to get to one container to get overseas, you know. So you realize the economies of scale. There's a lot of coffee to be grown to try and get that, you know. And I always use, when I first started, was another example, was as one of the cafes here in one of the malls, of the shopping malls. I asked the owners, I knew the owners, and I said, so how much coffee do you guys? I just planted, and I said, well, how many kgs of coffee do you guys use? And they were like, yeah, I think it's about 6 kgs a week or whatever. So I was like, sure, okay. And you times that by 4, it's 24 kgs. You times that by 12, it's 288 kgs. And you think, oh, plus a few C's in here or there. That's 300, 400 kgs. And in 2019, I'd done 300 kgs. I realized I don't have enough because that's, one little cafe is taking 300 kgs. And he's a small guy. After that, what I heard what other guys were taking. So, yeah, so you've got to have a lot to try and get to the speciality, coffee, or getting it overseas to have enough. I'm sure we'll get there, but it's a long-term goal, I guess. It would be nice to actually have to have your coffee overseas, to the guys there.
Well, that actually was one of the questions I wanted to ask you as well, in terms of what you think the future holds specifically for your business, for Mpenjati. Like if you kind of project forward 10 years, is that where you see it going? Much larger volumes, international export, or are there different directions you think you might take the business in?
No, I don't think so. I've had to diversify. I think that's what helps. If you look at, let's call it Africa, Ethiopia, Tanzania, the poor farmers there, they got small holdings, they supply the mills, they get paid, and off they go, whereas I've diversified my whole thing, where I've included agri-tourism in it to try and keep it afloat, So I look at it at the farming aspect, so up to green bean. The green bean then sells it to the roaster, which is my little roaster, and then the roaster sells it to the cafe, my little cafe, or vice versa, other cafes. Or but I've got the green bean side where I sell to a few roasters, so I've had to kind of split my risk in a sense, so that we can try and keep the farm going, and I've always wanted to try and keep it South African grown, and I've realized you need a lot of coffee to try and keep everybody going. So you have to, and not only that yourself, I don't want to have to go and buy some green beans and things like that. So it is a learning curve. So I think in the future, I'd like to obviously support a lot more roasters, or get to roasteries to buy some coffees from us. That would be nice to, you've got nice coffee, you guys down there in the Cape, you've got some guys up in Pretoria, Joburg. So yeah, it would be nice to get the coffee all over the place and to sell it as a green bean, at least you're proud. I had a friend also who actually also a mentor when I first started. I actually bought my roaster from him, and old Johnson, I'm sure a lot of guys know him, and he's actually roasted some. He went to Milan this last week, up to that Milan Coffee Expo, and he took some of my coffee there to showcase, which was nice, but who knows? I'm still so early, it's all a dream, eh? I guess I'm living the dream.
Well, I think we're all excited to see what's coming next. And so at the time of this recording, we are selling Mpenjati coffees roasted by Coffee, and hopefully there will be many more. And hopefully we'll have some to offer from some of our other roasters at some point in the future as well.
There's a lot of guys that are asking, and it's actually embarrassing, because guys are saying, hey, we've heard about you. Can you send us some green bean? And it's like, oh, I actually don't have enough, and it's heartbreaking, because you're like, oh, I want to supply the guy, but I can't, I've kind of kept my loyal customers, the guys that have come and visited and things like that, and said, okay, guys, there's a little bit for you, and the rest is, mine. And then next year you can have a little bit more, and come and see me so we can learn together, because what you want and what I want might be two different things, but let's work together, because I feel I got to be open with this whole thing, You might like the yellow honey, and that's the way you want me to do it, or a natural, and then we do that, because I think we've got to work together here. I think in the coffee industry in South Africa, there's a lot of guys that are all working together, which is nice and helpful. So yeah, that's how we've got to do it together. It's easy to send a guy sample, send him coffee, and hopefully he does justice to our coffee.
100%. And tell us a little bit more about the agri-tourism side of your business. So people can come and visit. What do you offer there?
Yeah, so we've got a little tour. So obviously you come to us, and then I take you to the farm, where we stay, where the coffee can I call it wet mill, dry cafe? That area is all where we are as separate to where the farm is. So the farm is 4 kilometers away. So we jump in my double cab for now. The dream was one day maybe to have a game viewing vehicle you could take cars. But anyway, but for now, we just jump in my double cab and we go over there. And I basically take you through the whole coffee growing process. So at the moment, the guys are lucky you get to see the cherries, taste the cherries. Most people don't realize how actually sweet a cherry is. You think coffee bitter, this. So when you squeeze that cherry into your mouth and you realize, how sweet it is and the sugars, it's crazy. And you get to see the green, the green cherry and the orange and the lollipops. And, so for now, it's interesting for the guys to come along now during picking. And then from there, we go through the farm. I take you through the farm, show you, different varieties. We go down. I just generally drive through. Then we end up at the nursery. I'll show you how we grow our trees and our own trees and that. Yeah. And then from there, when we're done, I take you through to the wet mill, show you how we pulp the coffee, depending on whether we're doing wet, dry, or wash processing, wash fermentation, yellow, red, natural. So, and then from there, we take you through the drying racks to show you the different fermentation methods that are being dried on the drying racks. I've got African dried beds. And then from there, we go into the huller. I show you the hulling and what we're actually looking for. At the end of the day, it looks like a peanut, which is the parchment, and people are quite intrigued. And then from there, we just take you. You'll see we've got a room with all the different processing. So you get to see from the hulling to the gravitational table or density to our grading table and through to the roaster. You get to see all of that. And then after that, you get to enjoy a nice cup of coffee and a cake on us. So that's a tour that we charge out. We've got a small fee for that. But generally, some of the guys, if they don't want to, if you come in and have a look, between my baristas or myself or the manager, we explain the whole process, but just, the dry processing, which is near the cafe. So you get to walk in and then I show you, the processing like that, the hulling, and explain. And then it's quite interesting, And then from there, people don't realize how much work it takes in to get to that nice cup of coffee that he drinks at the end.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. It sounds like an amazing thing for somebody who enjoys specialty coffee to be able to see all those steps in the process. So that's fantastic.
That's exactly it. We wanted to open it up too. So like you get the guys, the roasters, they must come and I always say they must come and play. There's guys if they want to play and try this fermentation, let's try and let's fiddle together. I think we need to have fun together. He needs to get his hands dirty and have fun.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a final question that I always finish on for everyone, which is asking what coffee you're drinking personally at the moment. Now, I'm assuming you're drinking Mpenjati coffee, but I'm curious, is there a particular variety that you're enjoying? Do you like it a particular way? What are you drinking?
So at the moment, I've got some F6 that I'm drinking at the moment. We obviously have always been drinking our own coffees for quite a bit. And then I know there's a few roasters out there that obviously try their coffees. So I've been trying to drink other guys' coffees to see what's out there in the industry. I don't want to be blindfolded. I know only my coffee and that's what it is. We've got to be open to be tasting a Yirgacheffe. We've got to be open to tasting Brazil, Colombia, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Burundi, whatever it is. We want to be able to taste so that we can improve and also get to those good coffees and know what's out there. I don't want to be blindfolded. Theo Leroux, my friend who comes down quite often to visit us, brings different coffees too. So you get to try out, the Fathers, the Bluebirds, all the coffees, origins, because they get them in as well. And then he comes down and he says, come, we need to taste all these coffees. These are wonderful coffees. So I have been experimenting with that just to kind of keep that also your palate a bit fresh. But now that we're picking and we've got a few more coffees available, I've got my guys fiddling with blends now. So last week we had a 60% Ketois washed, 20% SL28 washed, and a F6, I think. So we had 3 of our coffees blended, for the cafe for customers to enjoy. This month we've changed it to a Qatar washed and SL28 varietal. So a yellow. One of them is a yellow fermentation. So yeah, we're just trying to keep it interesting and different, you know. So yeah, we do drink everything, and we just mix and match. And sometimes you get to drink the dregs. Even my kids have got to know now, Dad, whose coffee's in the whose coffee are we drinking?
That's cool. That's cool. And I'm sure it must be interesting to drink blends of different varieties, but produced on the same farm. So I hope I get to try one of your blends at some point in the future. Well, Des, I want to thank you so much for your time and for making yourself available and
Pleasure.
figuring out how to do it during load shedding. We did record this during load shedding for those who are listening in the future. So thanks so much for your time and for sharing your story.
No, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us on your podcast. It's been much appreciated.
Well, that was Des Wichmann. I hope you agree after having listened to this episode that he is quite an impressive guy. He speaks very humbly about what he's done, but when you listen to some of the detail of what he's had to figure out, build for himself the first time, think through, and really problem solve on the ground, I was incredibly impressed. This man was doing something which I think is a lot more complicated than the stories of entrepreneurship that we sometimes celebrate around digital and software and things like that. He was doing something incredibly complex from scratch, and I just really enjoyed listening to that part of the story. Now, at the time of this recording, we are actually selling a coffee from Mpenjati roasted by our friends at Coffee. Now, there's only a limited amount of that coffee, so I don't imagine it's going to be around forever, but I'm hoping that it is going to be the first of many, and that we will have Mpenjati coffees to offer in future, both from Coffee and perhaps even from other roasters. So if at the time that you listen to this, something is available, I would highly encourage you to try South African specialty coffee. It is really something rare and very worthwhile to try coffees of that caliber coming from this country. And even if you can't do that, if you can find some other way to support Des and his business, whether that's visiting or simply just looking up and following him online, I would encourage you to do so. I suspect that we're going to see great things from this man and a lot more growth in the future. Thank you for listening. Until next time, happy brewing.